I want to try to hone in on a couple of things. The case, Mr. Hadley, of Experian and Superget, you purchased the company Court Ventures in 2012, in the spring of 2012. For more than a year after the time you purchased this company that had all this data, you were taking monthly wire transfers from Singapore, and your company did nothing. And as it turns out, those wire transfers were coming from a man in Vietnam who specialized in identity theft and was marketing the information that you owned to criminals to ruin people's lives. So my first question to you is, you were quoted as saying, we would know who is buying this. You were getting wire transfers from Singapore on a monthly basis, and no one bothered to check to see who that was?
Now, I want to be clear that this was not Experian marketing data. This was Experian authentication data, so it's under a different company, a different use. So that's just, I want you to know that it's not marketing
I don't understand
data.
The distinction. I think it's a distinction without a difference. I believe it was data that you owned, Experian owned. You'd purchased this data from CourtScan, and they had, in fact,
let me clarify.
Sold it to someone else.
Yeah, let me clarify that for you, because we've provided a full response to that question to the committee, and it's part of the 8 submissions that we've given. And I do have to say that it's an unfortunate situation, and the incident is still under investigation by law enforcement agencies. So I'm really extremely limited in what I can say publicly about it. But I do want to say this. The suspect in this case obtained data controlled by a third party. That was U.S. InfoSearch. That was not an Experian company. Through a company we bought, Court Ventures.
Okay,
prior to the time that we acquired that company. And to be clear, no Experian data was ever accessed in that deal.
I understand what you're saying. Here's what happened. You had U.S. InfoSearch.
No, we did not own
it. U.S. InfoSearch existed, and Court Ventures existed.
And they had a
decided, for commercial reasons, to make more money, to combine their information. And so they had a sharing agreement, those two companies, correct?
Right.
Okay. So these two companies had a sharing agreement. Then you bought one of those companies.
Court Ventures. That's
correct. So now you owned it. Now you stood in their place. Are you a lawyer?
I'm not a lawyer, but I understand we stood in their place.
Are there any lawyers on the panel? Okay. She'll back me up. You stand in their place when you buy when you buy this. So now you're there. Now, you said in your earlier testimony, we would know who is buying this. So you now are part of their transactions. And you were receiving the benefit of this monthly wire.
So during the due diligence process, we didn't have total access to all the information we needed in order to completely vet that. And by the time we learned about the malfeasance, it had, I think 9 months had expired. The Secret Service came to us, told us of the incident, and we immediately began cooperating with the Secret Service to bring this person to justice.
Okay.
And we're continuing to cooperate with the law enforcement in that realm. We were a victim and scammed by this person.
Well, I would say the people who had all their identities.
And we know who they are, and we're going to make sure that they're protected. There's been no allegation that any harm has come, thankfully, in this scam. Okay. And we've closed that down. And we've modified our process.
Okay, so let's talk about that process. This person got this man who they lured to Guam to arrest and who is now facing criminal charges in New Hampshire. They posed as a American-based private investigator. What is your vetting process when people want to buy your stuff?
That would have been Court Ventures who would have vetted that.
Okay, but I'm talking about now. You. What is your vetting process?
Right now, before we would allow access. First, let me say that person would have not gained access to Experian or this data if they had gone through our vetting processes prior to the acquisition.
And what would have stopped them?
We would have known who that company is. We would have had a physical on-site inspection of that company. We would have known who that business is and what that business's record is. We would have known exactly why they wanted that data and for what purposes, and that would have been enshrined in our contract. And we would have known the kinds of systems they have in place to protect the data that they gained. Those are all incumbent upon us under the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act and the FCRA.
Well, listen, I understand that this was not a crime that began under your watch.
Thank you.
But you did buy the company, and you did keep getting the wire transfers from Singapore, and the only reason you ever questioned them is because the Secret Service knocked on your door. I don't know how long those wire transfers from Singapore would have gone on until you caught them. I don't have confidence that it would have stopped at all. Oh. So I guess what my point is here, I maybe do not feel as strongly as others on this panel that behavioral marketing is evil. I believe behavioral marketing is a reality, and frankly, the only reason we have everything we have on the internet for free is because of behavioral marketing. So I don't see behavioral marketing as an evil into itself. What I do see is some desperate need for Congress to look at how consumers can get this information, what kind of transparency is there, and whether or not companies that allow monthly wire transfers into their coffers from Singapore from a criminal who is trying to rip off identity theft, whether or not they should be held liable for no due diligence on checking those wire transfers from Singapore until the Secret Service knocked on their door. And that's what I think we need to be looking at. And I don't think there's enough. I mean, I know that some of my friends on the other side of the aisle, you say trial lawyers, and they break out in a sweat. But the truth is that if there was some liability in this area, it would be amazing how fast people could clean up their act. And unfortunately, in too many instances, there's not clear liability because we haven't set the rules of the road. So I didn't mean to pick on you, Mr. Hadley, but this is a great example. And you are not a fly-by-night company.
No, we're not.
If this is happening under your watch, can you imagine what's going on with companies that are not as established as yours? I think
security is a huge problem.
It's serious and significant, and we need to look at it. Thank you all very much.